The last video was great. I got massive response so far saying that you liked my video, the way you understood how to do credential based authentication using Next.Auth version 5, Credential Provider and Next.js. Thank you very much for all your response. And that encourages me to go to the next step. I'm going to show you the entire registration flow along with the login flow using the Next.Auth Credential Provider and Next.js App Router. So in this video, we are going to learn a few things. For example, we will learn how to create a route handler so that we can handle the registration process of a user. While doing the registration, we'll also make sure that we encrypt the password. And then great thing is we are going to persist the user to the MongoDB. We are no more going to play with the local JSON file. We are going to get the database up and running so that we can persist the user into the database. And thus we will make our registration process done, and after that we will then change and tweak our code that we have written in the last video, where the authentication, the authorized method was happening from the local JSON file, is gonna happen from the MongoDB altogether. So I hope you are going to like this video the same way you like the previous video, and if so, please post a like, please post comment that you have liked it. That's the source of encouragement for me to make content for you, spend a lot of time making quality content for you. And if you haven't subscribed, my friend, please subscribe to this channel, because that gives me a lot of motivation to keep working for you, keep working hard for you to bring content for you. Thank you very much. Without any further delay, let's get started with code. So we left thing here in the credential provider video. We had this login form. What we're going to do first is we are going to put some text below the login form saying that if you don't have an account, why don't you register? Because that's the normal flow usually in any authentication. So that's why I'm taking a P and I'm saying, don't you have an account? If you don't have an account, great, no problem. I'm going to import a link tag and then put this P inside this div itself so that we don't need any additional div. And here I'm going to put this link tab with a href to a page called register, which doesn't exist at this point in time, but we'll be creating it very soon, and saying register over here. Let's put some styles with P so that it doesn't look very ugly. There is a gap now, and also with link so that we have some gap over here. And I think I can also put an underline so that it is clearly a link. Great. Now, if I am clicking on this, it will go to a 404 page because this page doesn't exist. I'm going to go to this app folder, here new folder, create a new route called register. Inside that, I'm going to create a new page called page.js file. I'm going to create a simple React component, rename this page to register page or registration page, whatever you want to name, and then putting some text over here like register page. So you see here, the page is already alive. I can see this text over here. That means the page is working. So here we are going to get our registration form. The registration form is going to have very simple thing. It's gonna have just the name of the user, the email ID of the user, and a password and a submit button. That's it. So that means I can actually reuse the login form that I have, right? So I have a login form inside components. I'm going to create a new file called registration form.jsx, and again going to create a new React component over here. Then I'm going to head over to the login form that I have. I'm going to copy everything over here. I'm going to take it to the registration form, and I'm going to replace thing over here. Okay, because the structure is almost gonna be same. That's the reason. Okay, this top div, I don't need it at this point of time. This on submit, I don't need at this point of time. I have an email address, I have a password, and I have a button. I'm going to rename this as register. Along with this, what I need, I also need a name. So I'm going to put another div over here. I'm going to change this as name, and this also as name. Let me format this one a bit. All right, looking better, but I have to import a few stuff before I start using this form. This form is having the same social login at the bottom. So I'm going to import this social login stuff. So right now my registration form seems to be ready. So I'll go to this register page and going to import the registration form. It will cry in case there is an error inside the registration form, and we are bold enough to fix that. Don't worry about that. So registration form. Oh, awesome. We have a registration form along with those two buttons. There is a register button. All good. So here also, just like we have added like over here, like don't you have an account, and if you don't have an account, register. I'm going to copy the same P from here, going to our page, and over here I'm going to put a fragment. Inside the fragment I'm going to put this P and pull this registration form above, and here I'm going to tell that instead of don't you have an account, I'll say already have an account. In that case, we can go to our login page, which is slash, and I'm going to tell this is my login page. I'm going to import the link tag now because I'm using things are back again, and this distorted style, let's fix it just by copying this particular class name from our main page. Here we'll get a div. That's it. Now everything looks at least better than before. So now we have the pages ready. If I click on login, it goes to login page. Here I can do login like before, but the login was happening from a local database, as you know from the previous video. Now we are going to stitch it to Mongo very soon. If we click on register over here, it's gonna go to the registration page. Before we do anything with Mongo or stitching the stuff, let us start creating the route handler, so that whenever somebody click on registration, the route handler gets called. Is basically an API that's we're going to create called /API/register, and we're going to post the name, email address, and password to that particular API. We are even going to encrypt the password so that we don't exchange the plain text password, and after that we'll be persisting that to the DB. Now to create a route handler for our registration, we have a folder called API we had created in our last video when we had to create this Next.Auth route, the special route for our authentication callback. Here, similarly, on this API folder, right click and create a new route called register. Inside register, right click again, new file, create route.js. If you want to create a route handler in Next.js, you have to create a folder called API under the app folder, and inside that you have to create your route name. For me it is /register, so it is registered. Inside that you have to create a route.js file. Now here we are going to do export const post. Why post? Because we have user who will be filling up this form and posting this data by clicking on this register button. So we have to handle the post method, post HTTP method at the backend. That's the reason it is post. It's the async method. We'll accept a request, and this is the method signature. Now from this request, we will get everything that will be submitting from here. How these two things will be stitched, we will go to that in a bit. But consider that the name that we have given for each of this field, for example, the name field, we have given the name as name. We can quickly see that from the registration form. The name field, the name is name. For email address, it's email. And for password, it's password, right? So this name, we can actually stitch to the thing that will be passing from this form to the backend database through this API. So through this request, we can expect that we will be receiving something called a name, an email, and a password. Okay. I like to develop things bottoms up than top down. So I'm doing the things API before assuming that how things will be coming over here, and then we'll be stitching stuff together. Okay, that's the fun. Now, if this is what we are expecting, how am I going to get this? This is going to come from await request.json from the request. So whenever I'm doing /API/register and with the post call body, the payload, whenever I'm sending this name, email, and password, this is gonna come over here. I'm keeping the name, email, password same as my field name because of many reasons, so that I don't have to change these words like name, email, password in many places in my application. I can keep them as same. I have to do few things. For example, I have to do a database connection to the Mongo, which you don't have. We are getting into it in a bit. Then I have to hash this password so that I can get an encrypted password. And then I have to find how to create a new payload to push it to my database. And then finally, I have to call the appropriate method to push it to the database. Okay, so few things to do here. I'll just write it down. Create a DB connection. That's the first thing that we are going to do. Encrypt the password. Form a DB payload. Update the DB. These are the steps we'll be doing in a bit after stitching how this form can connect to this particular API. Okay, so let's get back to our registration form. And first thing that I'm going to check about my button, whether it's a submit button or not, it's a submit button. Great. So from this form, whenever the form is submitted, we have to call that particular API route that we have half created, like /API/register, right? And we have to submit the enter form data to that particular API route so that we can start processing from there and connect to database, right? So for that, I'm going to do on submit and create a handler function called handle submit. You can give any name. You can also give do register or something. Then I'm going to create this function, async function handle submit. It can take an event. All right. Now from this event, the great part is I can get the entire form data, right? But as I have started using handle submit through on submit, I have to make this component as a client component. It also have the interaction, so it has to be a client component. So I made it as a client component. Now, what I say, I can get the form data from this event, but before that, I'm going to do event.prevent default, and then I'm going to do a try catch so that in future, if I'm throwing any error from anywhere, I will be able to catch them and show over here. Okay, so here I'm going to do const form data equals to event.current target, and then pass this event.current target to the form data object like new form data. So this is how when you are doing an on submit from event.current target, the current target, if you pass it to the form data constructor, what you get back, the entire form data. Now, if you have a form data, the great advantage for you is you can get like in your this particular handle submit function saying that the name will be form data dot get name. Okay, because this is the name we have given to my input field over here. If you see, the input field name is name. So whatever name you give over here, if you want to get the value back for that through form data, this is how you will be handling that. Okay, one dot. Now, after that, similarly, I can get email and password. So I'm going to change this to email, going to make this as email, going to make this as password, going to make that as password. Now, as I have got everything, now the next thing that I can do is to assume that /API/register route is there. And as the /API/register route is there, I can pass this name, email, and password from here with a post call, correct? So what I can do, simple await fetch /API/register. That's our route URL. And then I'm going to put all the option. The first option being a method gonna be post. Then I'm going to put headers. Inside the headers, the main thing that I'm going to put is the content type, and the content type will be application/JSON. Now after header, we have to send the payload or the body. For that, we'll be putting the body. The body will be JSON.stringify of my name, email, and password, the field value that I am getting from the form data. Absolutely great. Now I have this. So this is going to return me a response. So I'm going to take this response in a variable, and then here somewhere I can do a check saying that if response status, if it is 201, in that case, I consider that the registration is successful, and after registration, I can take the user to the login page. Usually, after registration, you take the user to the login page so that user can log in with the registered email ID and password or whatever, user ID and password. In our case, email ID and password. Now, how do we take the user to the login page? We can use the router. So for that, I can import use router from Next Navigation. I can get the router instance over here, and then here, if it is 201, I can do router.push. For us, the login page is in the slash, so it will go to the login page. We are all good. Now, who is going to send me this response.status? Of course, the API I'm calling is going to send me this response.status. So we can do like to the route.js file. Now I am getting this name, email, and password. How am I getting this name, email, and password? Because when this /API/register get called with this body, I'm passing this name, email, and password. With the shorthand, you don't have to do name colon name, email colon email, password colon password. You can just do name, email, password like that. This is what is going to come over here. Now let me do a console.log of name, email, and password. And somewhat at the bottom, let me send a next response pretending that each of these pieces are done, everything successful, registration successful, and your API is sending a success response saying that this particular user has been registered. So for that, let me first import next response from next server. And then around bottom, I'm going to tell return a next response saying user has been created and the status is 201. So anybody now doing /API/register a post call, I'm getting name, email, password, and I'm blindly returning a response saying user has been created with 201. It from my registration form, I'm calling /API/register with the post call. So it's actually satisfying the criteria. So it will return status 201, and I'll be going to the login page pretending that it is making a successful registration process. So let's go ahead and check that on our UI first. So first, let me give a name, an email address, itapas@email.com, and some password, which just doesn't have really any importance. I clicked on register. Did you see what happened? It came back to the login page. Hey, time to sign in. Correct? Because I have now email ID and password and the credential login it's saying. So if I go to my command prompt, I'm going to show you in a bit. You can see this stuff very clearly that I'm logging tapas@email.com and 1234. So I got all this value in my route handler. So it means if I have a database now, and if I know how to connect to the database, I can very well call the database functions or the database queries from my /API/register route handler to make every operation like saving this user into the database. So let's do our MongoDB setup and let's write the model, the schema, and let's write some queries and some functions so that we can utilize that to save this user to the database. In our Next.js series, in a video before, I have showed you how to set up MongoDB, what is like this Mongo Compass, how to create the model and things like that. That particular video link already there in the description of this video. You can check it out. But to tell you at a high level over here, I have installed MongoDB. I have also showed there that how to install MongoDB and all these things. So if you have never installed MongoDB, you can check that video out. Please do that. Install MongoDB, install Mongo Compass so that you can interact with MongoDB graphically. And here I have created a database called tapaScript. Inside that there is already a collection called courses. I don't need this collection. I'm going to create a new collection called user, and I'm saying create collection. So you can see this user collection over here. That's it we need. We don't need anything else at this point of time. We don't want to add any data because we're going to add the data through our registration process directly. Now, as we have this particular setup done, the next thing that you're going to do is to click on these three dots and click on copy connection string. Then go to your VS Code, come to .env file, create a string called mongo_db_connection_string. You can give any name for this, doesn't matter. Then paste the connection string over here. This will be till here. And after that, give the database name. For me, the database name is tapaScript. That's the reason I've given the same database name. If your database name is something else, give that database name. That's all. Then you can close this down. Next, we'll be using Mongoose and ODM to connect to MongoDB so that you don't have to really remember all the complex queries of MongoDB. You can more play in the JavaScript TypeScript world. So for that reason, open the terminal and use the command npm yarn pnpm bun, whatever you're using. I'm using yarn add mongoose, mongoose. It will install mongoose in a bit. Mongoose is done. I'm going to close this out. After that, under src, right click and create a new folder called model, and here create a new file called user-model.js. This is where we are going to create the user model and the schema. So what is model? What is schema? The schema is to define in a collection in MongoDB. If you have a document, okay, collection is just like table in your relational database. Document is just like your row in the relational database in the table. You will also have columns, right? Those columns or the properties are attributes. So you will define those properties and attributes as schema in your user model.js file. And then once you have the schema, you will be creating something called model so that using that model from your application, you can interact with the MongoDB directly using Mongoose. Okay. So first schema, then model. So let's come here, import mongoose, schema. After this, I'm going to define the user schema. If you're enjoying this video, you can be assured that you are going to enjoy a lot of application making in the coming month, because I'll be teaching you a lot of application building using React, Next.js, Tailwind CSS, ShatCN, and all these things together along with database like MongoDB, PostgreSQL, and all. So if you haven't subscribed, you subscribe so that you get notified with the awesome content that I'm going to create for you, and you learn things not only fundamentally, also by doing stuff just like this. So after this, the schema will be defined and the schema are the attributes. So what are the attributes we'll be storing in this particular collection? We'll be definitely storing name, correct? And the name will be a mandatory attribute and its type gonna be string. After name, we are going to store definitely password. So I'm going to copy that because it's gonna be almost same. I'm just going to change this to password. And similarly, I'm going to create one email. So that's my schema. My schema is ready. I am not inserting anything more than this at this point of time. So this is fine. Then I'm going to create a model. I'm going to export that at the same time. So export const, the model name I'm giving as user. And here I'm going to create mongoose, which I have imported before, dot model. And here I'll be giving my collection name user. I'm coming to that if you have a confusion. And then I'll be giving this user schema. Now, how mongoose deal with the collection name is, if your collection name is plural in the MongoDB, for example, small case users, you can give it user over here. The mongoose is going to translate that automatically to a plural smaller case. You don't have to worry about it. So if you are creating a collection called users, this has to be users. I just did it user. I'm going to just rename this to users so that it matches. Yes. So users, in that case, when you are creating the model, you can give the name as user, right? The way that we have given it over here. Mongoose will make it a plural of it, make it a small case, and it will match automatically with your collection name. All right. So this is done. My model is ready. Now, as my model is ready, the next thing that I'm going to do, saving of this user into the database. Now, for that to happen, the first thing that we have to do is to make a DB connection or create a DB connection. So for that, inside src again, let's create a new folder called lib, and inside lib, we'll be creating a new file called mongo.js. Here we'll be writing the code to get the connection to the MongoDB, so that after that, using model, you can do all sort of thing with MongoDB data, right? Now to achieve the connection, again, we need mongoose. And here I'll be creating a utility function that you can call every time, async function called dbconnect. Again, any name of your choice. Over here, I'm going to create const connection equals to await mongoose.connect. And over here, I'm going to use this particular MongoDB connection string from the env file. So here you just give process.env.this MongoDB string connection. Okay, that's done. Then you can return this connection in case somebody wants to use it downstream anywhere. And then you can do a catch of error. In this case, you can do throw new error of this, so that whoever calling, they can actually handle this error over there. So I have this db connect. This should be db connect. Okay. Now there are multiple places you can instantiate this db connect and leave it. I would suggest that we create this db connect in a place which won't be changed very often, right? So maybe our layout is the right candidate for that, because usually layout are the static and they are almost at the root level. So there, if we are actually making this connection is available for this entire session until you restart your local server, or wherever it is hosted, you restarting the server, this connection is available. So we have a layout, a top level layout. We can come over here and I can import this db connect over here. And as it is an async call, I have to make my layout as async. And here I can do await db connect. I can even test this out, saying that const connection equals to this, and then console.log of connection. And in my console, I can check whether the big connection data has come or not. I can see this again, right? I can see this immediately, that Mongo's connection. There is no exception. So this is working. Okay. I'll just remove this off. So my connection is established. Now the time to create code to save our user to the DB. Again, under src, let's create another folder called queries. And here, let's create a new file called users, because we're dealing with users. Now this is single file where you can create all the functions to deal with the user collection. For example, creating the user, or fetching the user, or filtering the user data, whatever you want, everything that you can do over here. These are all kind of utility methods. So for example, if you take an example, export async function create user, for example, which takes the user object, like with what are the information the user should be created. And then I need the user model now. This is where model and DB is getting connected. So I'll be importing the user model just now I have created. All right. And here I'm going to tell const user equals to await user dot create. The create method is from Mongoose, and I am going to pass this guy user over here. Once this is done, I can actually keep this in a try catch. It's always a good practice to keep all these things in a try catch so that if there's an exception happening, you can actually propagate that exception properly. So I can say throw new error of E. We are not going to do with the return value, so it's fine. This much is fine. So I have this create user thing done now. So I'll be going to my registration route, and here I'm going to import this create user. Create user guy takes a user. This user object I already have. But here I have to do something. I have to encrypt the password first. Now to encrypt the password, we are going to use a library called Encrypt.js. It's a well popular library called Encrypt.js. The usage is you can import it and then you can pass a string and then you can hash the string based on different kind of salt value, so that how much strengthen you want to put for the encryption is up to you. So we are going to use this up. So for that I have to install that first. So I'll go to my terminal and I'll say again yarn add. You can do npm or whatever you like to do and install Encrypt.js. It's installed. I'll come over here, import Encrypt.js. Excellent. Create a DB connection. Okay, we have already kept this DB connection into our layout. Do we need to do DB connection again? You don't need it, but think about a case that you might want to outsource your API without your UI. It means that somebody without your UI may call /API/register this particular endpoint. At that point in time, you want to connect to database, isn't it? So there is no harm of putting this over here. After connection creation, the next thing that we're going to do is encryption of the password. So you can do const hashed password equals to await. We have bcrypt now. With bcrypt dot hash, here I can pass the password and then the salt value, say 5. Okay, so we have DB connection and the hashed password. Now I can form the payload for my DB. Say new user equals to, it will be simply name, then password is changed to hashed password and is gonna be email. These are the three things that we're going to insert. That's great. And the finally is about updating the DB. For that, we already have a method called create user. So what we're going to do over here, we're going to do await create user and pass the new user. You remember we are throwing some error in case there is an error happening using try catch. So we have to do the same thing over here, putting this guy inside try and make the catch over here. And from here, if there is an error, we can actually throw a response code of 500 and saying that, there is a error message, just like how we have done 201 using a response. The same thing I'm going to copy over here and I'm going to put it over here. And in the next response, I'm going to say error dot message. And of course, status code, I'm going to put 500. That's it. That's all we need to do. Now this should work. If we go to our form, if we are making /API/register call using all this thing, it's going to come over here. It's going to collect all these details, name, email, password. Here we connected the DB and then password we are encrypting. Then we are forming this payload, the new user thing. Then we are putting this into our create user, and the create user coming over here is doing user.create, and we are coming to the model. Here in model, one thing we can do, I always recommend, is like make it like a singleton. Is like if you have this model created once, means like this, if there is a mongoose model users already exist, return that. Otherwise you create a new model. Unnecessarily don't create the new model again and again, right? So this is what we have done as well. Now with all this, can we try registering a user expecting it is going to go and sit inside MongoDB? So first, let me go and refresh. There is nothing yet. Now here I'm going to give a name. Let's start with my name. And then let's give a email address and let's give a password and let's do a register. I came back to login screen. That means registration is successful so far. If I go to DB and I'm going to refresh, wow. So I have the name, I have the password which is encrypted, and I have the email ID as well. Awesome, isn't it? So congratulations, the registration process has been done. Next thing, we are going to stitch the login path so that we can retrieve this one instead of retrieving the data from our local database or the local store that we had created in our previous video. We are going to match it with the thing from the DB itself. Can you do that? Now to get that piece done, our change will be only in one file. That's in auth.js file. So in the auth.js file, if you remember, we had a user collection data, which is like hard-coded user data, and we have done the authentication from this. But now we are talking big. We are talking about authentication using MongoDB, and not only that, we are going to do it with the data that we are registering our user with. So for that, we have to do stuff over here. We have to deal with user collection in Mongo. So first thing that we would be interested in, I'm going to knock this off. I'm not going to use that again. Saying import user, that's my model. I've imported that. Now I have encrypted my password and stored into the database. Have you noticed that? This is an encrypted password. Actual password I had given 1234, if I remember it correctly. That got encrypted to this string. So user won't give this as a password, right? From their login form, they will still give 1234, their password. So you have to still now encrypt, decrypt, and then you have to do the matching. Now you won't do it. You have bcrypt for that. So for the same reason, I'm going to import bcrypt. All right. Now there is a place which is called authorize. And here I have done get user by email from my local database, which was just a JSON file. Instead of that, this user should be picked from somewhere else. Don't you think so? So where? From where? So what we're going to do, we have this user model, isn't it? So I can do user dot find one. Find one means find one record. Now for one email, there will be only one record into the user table, right? Or the user collection, because the email is unique. So find one. Here you can provide a filter or a clause like a MongoDB query. So my clause will be if email matches credentials.email. In that case, consider this particular user is found. Okay. Rest of the code I am not changing. Then my matching was the user I was picking from my local JSON file. I was matching just the password. Now I cannot do that because the password I'm storing in an encrypted form. So I have to do a proper comparison. For that, I'm going to use bcrypt and going to use the compare method of bcrypt. So I'm going to say bcrypt.compare. The credentials password means whatever I'm supplying through my login form, this password should match whatever this particular user's password I have pulled from MongoDB, and let's do a compare. If the matching happen, is great, everything is fine. Otherwise, there is something wrong. That's the only change that I have to make over here into auth.js file. Now, friend, if you're coming to this video directly, I would encourage you to see the previous video where I have showed the authentication using Credential Provider and handwritten each of this code in the auth.js file. That's when you will have a lot of fun understanding this. Before testing out, I just want to call out that I missed one thing. I forgot to give await over here. Everything that you perform through your model to MongoDB using Mongoose is async call, so you have to give await over here, and authorize is anyway handling async. So now can we go ahead and try doing this? My email address was atapas@email.com and password was 1234. Do a credential login. Awesome. I am logged in and I can see myself over here that welcome atapas@email.com. That's the thing that I have registered with. I log out. Let's do everything from the beginning. I'll register a new user. Elon Musk. Email address elon@x.com. Password, I won't tell you, 1234. I'll register Elon Musk. I came back to my login screen. I'm going to really validate using my database. I'm going to refresh this to see Elon. I see Elon over here. I see the password over here. And then I'm going to go back to my screen again. I'm going to log in Elon with Elon's email and the password. Elon@x.com and the password was 1234, a simple password. Login. Elon is logged in. Have you enjoyed this video, friend? We have done registration and the login to MongoDB through the credential provider from Next.Auth version 5. We are moving step by step in last few videos. So the next video, what you can expect me to show you is using the MongoDB adapter. I am going to persist the session information, account information, and the user information once you log in using OAuth. Login using OAuth using Google and GitHub is already been established. Previous video we have seen it, is the code is there in front of you in the same repo. I'm going to extend that further to show the usage of MongoDB adapter with Next-Auth version 5 Next.js app router to persist all those session information. If you're interested, stay tuned. Don't forget to subscribe. And if you like this video, can you please post a like and comment and let me know? That will encourage me a lot to provide such content to you again. Thank you very much. Take a great care of yourself. We'll be back again soon with that video.